Japan had removed Korea off its so-called white list of trusted trade partners earlier this month, and it goes into effect starting tomorrow. While showing confidence that the nation can ride out Japan's trade restrictions, the Korean government and major companies have been bracing for impact, drawing up various countermeasures to mitigate possible fallout. Korea is also keeping close tabs on the U.S. China trade war as tensions re-escalated on a new round of retaliatory tariff hikes from the world's two largest economies. For a diagnosis on the nation's economic health amid continuing unfavorable external conditions, I'm joined by Dr. Shin Sang-hyup, professor of Pan-Pacific International Studies at Kyung Hee University. Welcome to the program. So the removal of South Korea from Japan's white list goes into effect tomorrow. Could you start us off by explaining what changes it would bring to the import procedures of Japanese goods?
Yes. When Korean company want to import something from Japanese the counterpart, the Japanese company should get the export approval from Japanese government. When Korea was on the list of whitelist country, then once they get the export approval, they do not have to get the export approval for 3 years. So once they got the export approval from Japanese the government once, it could be effect for 3 years. But if, after Japan removed Korea from the white list country, then whenever they export something to Korea, they should get the individual export approval. And the one thing which I want to underline is that it could take up to 3 months. So on the part of the Korean companies, uncertainty in supplying needed raw materials emerging as one of the most serious difficulties in doing business activities. So certainly it can be a negative impact on the Korean companies in doing business activities.
Now, Japan has not yet specified which items will need to go through the individual case-by-case export approval. So for now, just 3 high-tech materials would need to go through the individual export approval. How do you think Japan would play it out from this point on?
Well, we have to wait and see. But personally, I think Japan will be extremely very careful in taking the actions, measures after the Korean government break off the GSOMIA, because if they take aggressive measures against Korea, then it can result in retaliatory measures from Korea. So there must be escalations in the measures taken by the both governments. It is not good for the both countries' national interest. Everybody knows it. So I think Japan will take some measures, such as including a few number of the items, which are subject to individual export approval. But I think that the Japan will refrain from taking very aggressive measures, particularly, as I mentioned already, after the GSOMIA was decided. Break off the GSOMIA was decided by the Korean government.
So you don't expect too radical retaliatory measures from Japan,
no.
At least for the time being. Now, global ratings agency Moody's Investor Service revised down Korea's economic growth forecast for this year from 2.1% to 2%, citing Korea's trade battle with Japan. It said the conflict undermines Korea's near-term growth prospects. Now, if we're looking at a long-term Seoul-Tokyo trade battle, how would it affect Korea's future growth as well as the credit ratings of South Korean firms?
Well, if the situation goes for quite a long time, definitely it could be a negative factor on the Korean economy. If I quote another measure taken by the Pitch, which is one of the also very well-known, worldwide well-known, the credit rating agencies, and according to their announcement, they forecasted that this year the Korean economic growth rate was 2.5%, but they lowered its economic growth rate to 2.0%. And one thing which I want to underline is that the next year's expected economic growth rate of Korea, they announced that it was 2.6%, but they also lowered this interest rate up to 2.3%. And then they emphasize that these figures do not fully reflect negative impact caused by the long-term trade war between Korea and Japan. So if the situation, particularly uncomfortable trade relations between Korea and Japan continued for a while, definitely the Korean economic growth rate could be lower than this one. And then subsequently, it could be also negative impact for the credit rating of the Korean economy in the global financial market. So what we should do is that definitely we should we should find a solution to the trade war dispute between Korea and Japan.
Now, speaking of which, the South Korean government made various efforts to draw up short-term and long-term plans to counter Japan's trade restrictions. How do you assess our government's efforts so far, and what more needs to be done?
I think it's quite good. I think they do all what they can do at the moment. The Minister Hong announced their plan on the short-term basis as well as a long-term basis. It's quite good. On the short-term basis, he emphasized that the government will make every effort to minimize the damages on the Korean economy caused by trade dispute with Japan. But I want to emphasize this one. I think many people are right now focusing on potential damages or difficulties which big business conglomerates such as Samsung and SK will take caused by the trade dispute with Japan. But we have to put more priorities, and we have to put more priorities on monitoring or analyzing the potential damages which SMEs could take from the trade dispute with Japan, because small and medium-sized enterprises should be the foundations of the economies, economic foundation. So we have to check it out, and we have to prepare how we can help them to minimize the potential damages on their business or activities caused by the trade dispute with Japan.
That's right, and many experts have been pointing out that it's the small and mid-sized firms that will be the hardest hit.
Yes.
And the big conglomerates will probably survive Japan's trade restrictions. Now to U.S. China trade tensions. China has slapped additional 10% and a 5% tariff hike on U.S. goods worth $75 billion last week, which will affect some 5,000 items, including agricultural products, crude oil, and automobiles. How do you see the move?
Well, those measures, were expected because the game is on. China will do every effort to change to take the initiatives at the trade negotiation with the United States. Well, at the moment, the trade negotiation was suspended for a while. And then on such a kind of situation, each side tried to take the initiatives at the trade negotiation. So as a way to take the initiative at the trade negotiation, Chinese government took those kind of measures. Particularly, if I add one more, the case, showing the Chinese new stance about the trade war with the United States. That is that, the automobile was not subject to the imposition of tariffs, tax-exempt, tax-free item. But according to the announcement released by the Chinese government from December 15th, they will impose 25% on imported car from the United States. And they also plan to impose 5% tariffs on auto components imported from the United States. So the Chinese government just tried to take retaliatory measures in order to change the Americans' stance at the trade negotiation. But as already heard, the President Trump emphasized that we have to start to resume the trade war, and then he said that they got the call from Chinese government, and then they are ready to resume the trade, negotiation. Of course, just after the Chinese announcement of the imposition of additional tariffs on American the products, they also announced their retaliatory measures. But just after that, Mr. Trump emphasized that they are ready to resume the trade negotiation with China. So everything is right now is confusing. I mean, we have to wait and see. But one thing which I want to emphasize is that everybody knows that if the situation goes on, it's like the situation we can see when the two trains go each other. I mean, so to avoid the confrontation, those kind of tragic results, I mean, everybody, particularly the government officials of these two economic giants, recognize very well they should find the solution. I mean, they should compromise at one point, and then everybody, I mean, very curious about what is the point. But I think they went too far already. So I think they will refrain themselves from taking more aggressive measures against each other.
Now, as you've mentioned, U.S. President Trump went back and forth over the last few days, stirring up quite a big confusion. But he also did tweet that a 5% increase on tariffs would be imposed on Chinese goods. He said Chinese goods worth $250 billion, currently taxed at 25%, would be taxed at 30% from now. How do you see this move?
Well, I think Mr. Trump just twists the arms of the Chinese government as much as he could. As I already explained, they want to take the initiatives at the trade war with China as much as they could. So one of the easiest way to level up the pressure which they want to put on the shoulder of Chinese economy, Chinese government, is increase the tariff rates, because almost every items of products imported from China have been the subject to imposition additional tariff. So at this stage, by increasing the tariff rates, I think they could give more pressure on the Chinese economy. So that is the easiest and efficient way. I think the Americans recognized this one as those kind of way.
Now, Trump has also threatened that he has the right to order U.S. firms to cut business ties with China based on the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. Could you explain to us what this act is and whether Trump would actually use the card?
IEEPA is a federal law, authorizing the President of the United States to regulate international commerce, international trade. According to the definition, after declaring national emergency, because of this kind of threats, because any kind of unusual and extraordinary the measures taken by the foreign the governments, if the USA government have huge threats, the USA government can take some measures based on IEEPA. And according to this act, the USA government can confiscate all properties of foreign government owned in the United States. There are various ways. And as you mentioned, and then they can also ask the USA companies withdraw from China. Such kind of measures can be possible. But I think this cannot be happen. Because this means if the USA take the measures based on this act, I think the real war started, and no one could control the situation. So I think this is a way to increase their leverages in dealing at the trade negotiation with China. But I think the possibility which USA government use this act as a basis for their another measures is very small. Not very high.
Now, one last question for you. Mr. Trump, as you've pointed out, said that he got a phone call from China and that he expects a good deal. He expects a deal this time and that the talks would resume. Can we expect some progress this time?
I think so, because situation has been out of control in some sense, because USA has taken, looking at just their side, and while China has been looking at their own side. But as I already said before, if they stick to their current stance, then no way to solve the current issues. And the point which I want to emphasize is that USA and China is number one and number two economies. Because of trade war started in 2018, the global economy has faced very serious challenges. So the USA and the Chinese government officials have enough reason, domestic reason as well as external reasons why they have to find a solution to the trade war between two countries. But I think at the trade negotiation, if they resume, this time, I think maybe Mr. Trump try to find a compromise point, because they have more power. They are in the more advantageous position at the trade with China. So I think if they really want to avoid trade war with China, USA should change some changes in their stance toward this trade negotiation. Then China will respect it. I think there must be high possibility that China will follow the USA new stance and new approaches to find a solution to the trade war between two countries.
All right, thank you, Professor Shin, for your perspectives.
My pleasure.
And that does it for this edition of News in Depth. From all of us here at Arirang, thank you for watching.